Welcome to the Shun Podcast. Today we have the story of Caleb, who took a stand and left the cult of Jehovah's Witnesses at just 18 years of age. He's a brave young man, and he had to make very hard choices. So listen to his story, and afterward keep listening. I want to tell you what this young man is doing and how you can send him a message of support. Also, there's a special announcement after this story, so keep listening.
My name is Caleb. I used to be one of Jehovah's Witnesses. I'm 19, and I am Shun. I was born into the religion. I was baptized at 14. My father was born in the religion as well. My mom got baptized at 16. She was related to some Jehovah's Witnesses in the congregation. I was a part of the Jersey Shore congregation in Pennsylvania. It's kind of an odd name, but for Central PA. But yeah, she was related to some Jehovah's Witnesses, got studying, and she got baptized at 16. Then my dad was born in, and my grandfather and my grandmother were actually the ones that started kind of in our family. My grandfather, he was part of the Seabees battalion in Vietnam. He got drafted, and then he decided to join so he wouldn't get put in as regular Army infantry. So he went in as a construction worker in the Seabees battalion as a welder. I think he had gotten training before that to be a welder. But when he got back, he was in California teaching firearms classes to soldiers. And then sometime after that, he started working in the private sector, I guess you could say. And one of his coworkers was a Jehovah's Witnesses, and they kind of started studying. Then it kind of went off to my grandmother. And it was kind of interesting. He said after he knew it was the truth, he went out and he was telling other people he worked with in the past about it, and it's the truth, and you got to get into it. But yeah, so they got into it, and that kind of started my family into being Jehovah's Witnesses. Well, being a Jehovah's Witness, when you're born in, it's your entire life. My mom, as I said, she got baptized when she was 16. She'd talk about before that, she went out with guys, boys really, when she was in middle school and elementary school. And she had Christmas and everything. And she gave all that up when she was 16, obviously. But I didn't know about that, so it really was nothing to me. But I took great pride in being one of Jehovah's Witnesses. When you are a Jehovah's Witness, it's kind of a contradiction in that it's your entire world. But the organization is so small. And it's so small, but you think they're everywhere. And that the world is embracing that you're this giant force in the world. And so I took great pride in being a Jehovah's Witness and being a part of that force. And now our family, the Tanners, my last name's Tanner, they were well known, obviously in our congregation and the surrounding congregations, but also in the circuit and even in the district. We're just well known as being spiritual, hardworking people. We were tradespeople. We weren't business people or car dealers or anything on that level. But my grandfather was a welder. My dad is a welder. He teaches welding. So what I'm saying is we were all respected, and we all gave good talks. We were all just spiritual, and we knew what we were doing. My grandfather, he is an elder now. He's actually in the German congregation in Central PA. He's out preaching to Amish and whatnot. But he was the service overseer. He was a lot of things probably in his life, but he was the service overseer for a while in our congregation. And my dad was actually the Kobe, the coordinator, for quite some time after one of the other elders died. But yeah, so they were both respected elders. And so I was respected, and I took great pride in that. When I was a Jehovah's Witness, I didn't view the world as it is. It's not black and white. as I thought it was. It's very complicated. I thought that every little natural disaster or everything that happened at the UN or between nations was due to this being near the end, right? Every time someone got disfellowshipped or I heard about someone who I used to hang out with leaving, I thought it was like a switch. Just, okay, I'm not going to hang out with them anymore. They're obviously a bad influence. And that also transferred to school. When I was in elementary school, I actually told my friends at school that I couldn't be friends with them because they weren't going to be true friends, like apparently the ones at the congregation were going to be. I isolated myself in middle school and high school. Not necessarily in interaction, but in having deeper friendships. I didn't really get to know the people I was around, although I was out there with my friends, and I'm connected to them now, the ones I had in high school. But I definitely didn't form deeper friendships with them. I wasn't my best friend, who's my roommate now. I didn't go to the movie theater even with him before I left. I wasn't allowed. I tried to. I asked my parents, but they wouldn't even let me. I would get to know somebody to a certain point, one of my peers, but that was it. And they would be limited to school, my school friend. But when I left that area, my best friend, who was a Jehovah's Witness, his name is Trent. He was my friend outside of school. He was my best friend, period. He's the guy I hung out with. He's the guy I went to the movie theaters with, or we went to congregation football games or whatever. He's the guy I hung out at his house. But when I was at school, those were kind of my school friends. I kind of pushed them off from being anything more than that. My childhood wasn't bad. It was, I thought it was normal. I knew somewhat that it was different from the rest of the world, but it was a normal Jehovah's Witness childhood, I thought. But it wasn't bad. I can't say I had a bad childhood. I had Legos, I had Transformers, I had everything I could dream of, Right, that's all I needed. And if I had to ask for one more thing, it'd be video games when I was a kid. But, other than that, it was it. It was a good childhood. But like I said earlier, I isolated myself in school from other kids. And when I was younger, I told kids that I couldn't be friends with them. So it wasn't bad. At home, school, I just didn't salute the flag and whatnot. And at the meetings, I had my first Bible reading at age 8, I think. And, but I was progressing, when I left, I was probably within the next year going to be a ministerial servant. So I was rapidly progressing, and everybody liked me. I liked pretty much everybody. I didn't have Christmas or 4th of July or whatever. And something else, I guess you could say I didn't know my family. My family was limited to my grandfather and my grandmother, who I've already brought up, my mom and dad, and my sister. And that was pretty much it. I have an aunt who I know more now than I ever have. And I have an uncle on my mom's side. My aunt's on my dad's side. I have an uncle on my mom's side that I know better than I ever have, But I didn't know those sides of the family outside of Jehovah's Witnesses. We'd go to family reunions, but they were like total strangers. And again, I isolated myself. I talked to them, but I didn't, go any deeper than that. Yeah, never connected on any type of level. So, you could say that. I suppose my congregation, the people in my congregation became my family. My entire social network. When I got to be about 12, although I was a Jehovah's Witness, I'm still a normal boy, right? So I started getting more into girls as I hit puberty, and I got into watching pornography and whatnot, and I felt totally guilty about doing that. And eventually, I got into I started masturbating, a little later on, and that was kind of the marking. If I look back at anything, that was the mark of my teenage years, because it's totally looked down upon. I mean, anybody can look down on it, but it's like, if you do this, you're not going to make it into paradise. If you keep doing this forever, you're not going to get into paradise. And so I was always feeling guilty as a teenager because I was doing that. I tried to quit. I even told my dad at one point, and that helped for a while. And then I got to, the elders were asking me questions about baptism, and so I had 3 different sessions with the elders about going over the questions for my baptism and everything. And I was still doing it then. I had a spurt there right before my baptism where I was doing all right, and after my baptism when I was doing all right. But then, as soon as I had a relapse, it was like overwhelming guilt. And I think that's the one strike on my teenage years that I can really look back on. And that would kind of play out somewhat before I leave, with how I leave. Yeah, my teenage years weren't bad. I mean, I as I got into high school, peers, other students, they started to look at me a little better. I could joke with them more. I was no longer picked on. I was picked on a lot in middle school. But yeah, I was kind of like the class clown. I'm not the class clown in the yearbook, but I should have claimed that title. I mean, come on. But definitely high school was a lot better than elementary or middle school for me. It was just a better time. But again, overwhelming guilt over what I'd supposedly been doing wrong. I started to feel like I could never quit. After I'd tried quitting so many times, I actually got to the point where in my head I was like, well, I may not make it into paradise, but maybe I can help somebody out in the ministry to get there. So I was kind of like sacrificing myself in that way. And I had actually gone to the elders. I filled out a regular Pioneer application once I was, last September. Not the September we just had, but the September before that, I had filled out a regular Pioneer application because that's the beginning of the new service year. And I had just graduated. And I couldn't, in my right mind, tell them that I wasn't having these problems, and so I actually told my dad again and, tried to quit again. But I was almost a regular Pioneer before I left, if it weren't for that. So I got my first job at 16, like a normal being. There was a brother that we were eating dinner with, and he said, yeah, I've had a job all my life since I was 16. Never have I not really had a job since I was 16. I was thinking in my head, I should probably be like him and get a job when I'm 16 and have a job. So my first job was at 16, and I was working at a restaurant with a bunch of other worldly guys. I was the only Jehovah's Witness there. I could joke with the guys at work, and they swore and they'd make dirty jokes and whatever. And it was funny. It was fun to be around them. And it was hard work too. I worked in a restaurant where you moved. You did your job or you were going to get yelled at. No bullshitting around. You hustled. And it was hard work, but we all still joke with each other. And the only time I'd really gotten done any kind of real work was with my grandfather or with my dad or at the Kingdom Hall, and so I could joke with these worldly guys and it was fine. That didn't have a significant impact on, when I left, or my decision to leave, but it definitely kind of changed something on how I viewed worldly people. In the summer of 2015, I was looking to complete for my high school to graduate. At that time, I had been a junior, and in the fall there, I was going to be a senior in high school. and I would have to complete a senior project. And so for my senior project, I actually wanted to do something super easy that I would have to put very little work into, and that would not really, affect much of my life. So I wanted to auxiliary pioneer. And so I filled out, I did all the information for the school to apply for that. And I sat down with the principal and the vice principal, and we talked about me auxiliary pioneering, how that would have some impact on the community, how I could have some relation with the community in doing this, because that was really a big focal point, was community interaction. And so I talked with them and weighed the pros and cons. They let me do it. And so over that summer, I was able to auxiliary pioneer for 2 months. I think it was July and August of 2015. I did that. And I actually auxiliary pioneered in my congregation, Jersey Shore, and also the Milton congregation, Milton, PA. And it's funny because I auxiliary pioneered with this girl. I won't name her because she is out. This girl, I'll call her Jen. But I auxiliary pioneered with Jen, and we were hitting it off. Like, it was awesome. We had a great time for those 2 months auxiliary pioneering together. She was doing it as well. And but she'd later leave. She left, actually, Jehovah's Witnesses before I did. She's a little younger than I am by a tad. But so I did that, and that's kind of where I was at that point. I wanted to, even in my schoolwork, I wanted to incorporate Jehovah's Witnesses. Even in my senior project, I wanted to do that. And so come my senior year, that's the mindset I was in. It's my last year of high school. I got to figure out where I'm going, what I'm going to do. I want to go to Bethel, but I have to regular pioneer before I go to Bethel. What am I going to do when I'm at Bethel? My father and my mother, I think my mother still works there. I'm not sure. But they both work at a college in Williamsport, Penn College, and so I could get free college. It was a trade school more than anything. They wanted to be called a college, but my dad, like I said, he's a welder. He teaches welding there at Penn College. And so I wanted to get an associate's degree in a trade, which was not against the rules or even against common thinking. If you go for a trade, it's all right? If you go for something like business administration, that's a little different. But if you go for a trade, that's all right. So I was going to go for a 2-year degree in mechatronics, which is like mechanical, electrical, electronic stuff. That's what I was going to do. I decided that. And so going into my final year of high school, that's kind of where I was headed. I knew what I was going to do, and I wanted to get to Bethel. So that's where I was at. Now, there was a girl. My school was very small. It was K through 12, like 400 kids on campus. At that time, I think it was like 350. So our classes were really small. My graduating class was like 14 kids, I think. Oh, yeah. I was the valedictorian, but, I didn't get grades good enough to be a valedictorian, in my opinion. Anyway, there was this girl, really, really pretty. Her name is Kaylee, and she started flirting with me, kind of like the second half of the school year, which was crazy because I'm nerdy Caleb over here, and so we started talking. We'd Snapchat each other and whatnot. After school, and I'd kind of flirt back with her too, because like I wasn't going to have a relationship with her, obviously, but maybe I can, I don't know. I was a guy, out of my mind, a Jehovah's Witness guy out of my mind, I'll kind of flirt back a little bit. So we graduate. I can skip to that. We graduate. I present my senior project, goes great. I'm valedictorian. I give my speech at graduation. I like telling people that, I was valedictorian in my class, and then I just like to leave it there because my class was 14 kids. So kind of leave it. They can think of how many kids were in my class on their own. But we did that, and then my grandparents always wanted to take myself and my sister out to Wyoming, and because that's where they used to live. That's where my dad was born. He was born in I forget what hospital out there, but they always wanted me to take us out there, see Yellowstone, visit some friends of theirs, which I was talking about earlier. I'll get into that. So we go on vacation. It was like 4 weeks. We drive out to Wyoming, and we see Yellowstone and everything, and we visit some friends of my grandparents out there, a couple that my grandfather knew way back in the day before they were Jehovah's Witnesses, and he actually got them to convert. And the husband actually doesn't do anything about Jehovah's Witnesses anymore, but the wife is like a regular pioneer. She's like all in. And but this entire time I'm talking to Kaylee over Snapchat. We're just talking to each other. But I'm still a Jehovah's Witness, and I'm still, wanting to do what's right in their eyes. And we're out in Wyoming, and I just tell her, if you're not going to become one of Jehovah's Witnesses, that's what I was trying to do. I was trying to convert her because I kind of wanted to have a relationship with her. And I just told her, if you're not going to be a Jehovah's Witness, I can't keep talking to you anymore. And so we kind of cut things off. But we got back from Wyoming, and I started auxiliary pioneering regularly. I had quit my job because I didn't like it, and I was going out to Wyoming for 4 weeks, and I just quit. And so we got back, and I didn't have a job for a few months. I was running low on money. So I went to work for a construction crew of Jehovah's Witnesses, and I was working with them for a few months. And this is probably around August. I started classes at Penn College for mechatronics, and it was like residential electric and AC and whatever. It was pretty fun doing all that. But sometime around September or October, she gets in contact with me again, Kaylee, and we start talking a little bit more, and eventually I come to the point where I'm like, I really want to have a relationship with her, and I got to figure out if this is the truth or not. So that's kind of when that was kind of like the turning point. I wasn't going to give up the organization for her, but if the organization was not the truth, I wasn't going to give her up because of it. So I decided to do more research. Basically, I came to the point where I was like, if this is the truth, I'm going to stick with it. If it's not, I'm going to stick with Kaylee. That's the point I came to. And I did my own research, and I remember sitting there late at night, and all this is coming back to me now. I was sitting there in my bed, door closed. I already knew the whole routine from years of looking up stuff I shouldn't. And I was looking up videos on YouTube of people examining the Bible. And eventually I started watching religion versus evolution debates and God versus evolution debates. I had kind of made a pact with myself at the beginning that I wasn't going to look up any apostate information from ex-Jehovah's Witnesses, right? So anything about Jehovah's Witnesses. I wanted to keep it to the Bible. So that's kind of how I started my exodus, you could say, is because of her. And I grant her all that. We're not together anymore, but I kind of give her that in my life. She turned my whole life around, unbeknownst to her. I remember texting her some nights and just like freaking out because I'm finding that my entire life was a lie, and just telling her that all this information I'm learning, she may have not gotten a whole lot of it because I was just going off and off and off and off, just these long ass texts. But yeah, it was just a crazy time, and nobody knew I was going through this, and I didn't want them to know for a while. It was all within a matter of weeks, and it might have been fast-tracked by Kaylee's influence there, that I wanted to be with Kaylee. It was within weeks Actually, within probably a week, I knew it wasn't the truth. But in weeks, I made my decision that I no longer wanted to be one of Jehovah's Witnesses. Within like 4 or 5 weeks. And I picked a day, December 19th, to tell my parents and my grandparents and my best friend, Trent, that I no longer wanted to be a Jehovah's Witness. That was kind of the perfect day. College was out. So my parents, college had just gotten out, so my parents wouldn't be busy and they could like take the next month and a half to kind of go through their son's not going to be a Jehovah's Witness anymore. Very quickly, I decided to not be a Jehovah's Witness, but those were kind of the early things. December 19th rolls around, and I'm scared as hell. I had told my grandparents I wanted to talk to them that night. I told my mom early in the morning. My plan was I was going to tell my parents, then my grandparents, and then my best friend that night. We were going to go out to see Star Wars Rogue One for the first time, which is a great setting, you know, that you're going to tell your best friend that you're leaving the religion. But and that didn't really work out. My dad was out cutting wood because we burned wood, and he got real pissed off, and as he does, he gets angry a lot. And he came in the house all angry, and so I was like, all right, I'm not gonna talk to you guys until later tonight. And because I was gonna talk to them that morning in the proper order. And so I forget what time came around that I was gonna go meet Trent. He was out in service. It was probably around 3 o'clock or something. I decided to skip my grandparents, tell my grandparents, and I'd go straight to my best friend. So I put together this manila packet full of information, you know, everything I'd found, right? About the pyramids, Noah's Ark, contradictions in the Bible. That's about it, honestly. And I was going to give it to my friend Trent. And I stuck it under the seat in my car. I told him I want to drive, right? I wanted the night to be on my terms. I picked him up. We went to the movie theater, saw Rogue One. It was pretty good, but, you know, it's kind of slow in the middle a little bit. So, you know, we were friends right up to the end, right up till I told him we were friends, and we were joking and everything. I was pretty calm about it, but the movie theater was in Williamsport. We got in the car, and he was like, I told him at the beginning of the evening, I want to tell you something very serious. I had done something like this before, you know, told him I want to tell you something. Don't make me back out. So he knew what to do. And so he was like, okay, what do you want to tell me? I was like, how about we drive back up to the hall? His car was up there. And so we did, and I put it in park. The bad thing was, which I didn't really want to happen, was he had to work that night. So he would have to go to work after I told him this. I really didn't want that to happen. But I just told him, I said, you know, this is very serious. I no longer want to be one of Jehovah's Witnesses. And he kind of stopped. Trent, he's, I think right now he's like 22, 23. He's a few years older than I am. He's always been the person I looked up to. He's always been my role model in life. And he was asking me questions about it. You know, he started getting emotional, but he was asking me questions about it. And I pulled out the manila envelope, and I set it there, and I said, if you want to take that, that's all I've found right now. If you want to take that with you, look up the things. But that's all your choice. And he declined. He wasn't going to take it. And he started crying. And he sat right there and cried in front of me. I mean, that's fine. You know, I tried to cry. I'm not a crier. But, yeah, I told him all that. I didn't want to be a Jehovah's Witness anymore. I'd been doing more research, and that's just the conclusion I came to. And he cried. He told me, well, I hope you get through this. I hope you change your mind. And he got out of the car. He called off work. He went home, and he cried for another 2 hours. He still lived with his parents. And he told his parents everything. He was with them for like another 2 hours crying over it. You know, we were best friends. We were brothers, basically. Because every other guy in our congregation had left. Every other boy around our age had left, and it was just us two, you know. But it was very hard. After I pulled out, I went to my grandparents, and I sat down to my grandparents. We kind of bullshitted for a while, and then I told them, well, I've come to the conclusion I no longer want to be one of Jehovah's Witnesses. And my grandfather is, I don't look at him the same now as I did. But he was like, what? And he just started asking me questions. Why do you feel this way? And then he said, it's all one blur. The whole night's a blur. Whatever conversations I had the same conversation pretty much 3 different times. It's all a blur. And he just said, I would never give up my creator over, whatever you found. And I didn't present them with the information. They're both 70. I didn't want to ruin the perfect life they built for themselves. I just wanted to say, I'm out. I'll tell you why if you want to know, but I'm out. And that's that night. December 19th is the last time my grandfather ever talked to me, and we were tight. We were. He was the other guy I looked up to, Trent, and then my grandfather. And he dropped me like a rock. He would pass me in the congregation. I still went to meetings after that for a little while. I'll get into that, but I'd pass him in the Kingdom Hall, and he'd pass right by me. He wouldn't say a word. And so that was really bad. My grandmother, the very next day or the day after the next day, because I told him all Monday, and then the next evening was Tuesday. We had our meeting. But she came up and she talked to us and everything, My grandfather didn't. And so I went out to the car, drove home. I had one more conversation to get through. I told my parents that, and we sat up. I forget what time it was. I know we went out to an early showing, me and Trent, because I had a lot to do that night, I probably got home around 7:30, 8, something like that. And we sat up till 10:30, probably at night, talking about it. And I was presenting my arguments, and I pulled out my envelope I still had and showed them all the arguments. We were looking up scriptures and everything as to what I'd found and whatever. And they didn't believe anything I said. My mom for a good month and a half, 2 months, she thought there was something else up. She thought I did something else that made me want to leave. I wasn't leaving because I knew it wasn't the truth. I couldn't leave for a doctrinal problem. But yeah, and so then we went to bed, and I can't even remember what the next day I did. I know I stayed up a little while. I know I was up for a while that night. But my parents were kind of like on their tippy toes. They were kind of like touchy around me. They weren't mad. They were just like, there's a problem. I can't think of the term, but they were cautious around me. Trying not to upset me or trip me, or I don't know. I wasn't really pissed off or anything. It was different after that. And so for the next month and a half, or not a month and a half, maybe the next month, every week, at least 4 or 5 times a week, me and my parents would stay up, and I'd tell them I didn't have a job at this point. I had quit with the construction company full of witnesses I was with because, I knew I wouldn't have a job there after I left. Nor did I want to have that kind of conflict for them. But so I had all the time in the world. I wasn't pioneering anymore because, that's all out the window. So all I was doing, my dad downloaded Watchtower Library, which I still have on my laptop, and all I did all day was watch debates and look up stuff on Watchtower Library for weeks. For weeks I did that. And eventually I got into looking more into evolution. I really got into it and really got a better understanding of it so that I could debate with people about it. But like I said earlier, my friend Trent, he went home, and his dad was an elder, a big wig in the congregation. And he called my dad, and Larry was his name. My dad's name is James. Larry called my dad James, and Larry said he'd get another brother in the congregation, and they'd sit down, they'd talk with me. And so basically we picked a date, and I went to the Kingdom Hall, and we just talked. Everything I'd come up with, a little more stuff that I'd come up with since I told everybody, because I was doing so much research. Yeah, this is probably around the end of December. I sat down with Larry and Monty in the congregation, Jersey Shore congregation library, and we just talked about everything I had looked up, and they were going through the normal routine. These two brothers, they're not knowledgeable in evolution and stuff like that. They're not not arguing with me. They were trying to help me come to a better understanding. And we were looking up different scriptures and whatnot. Basically, they didn't convince me of anything. I told my mom, I said, if they convince me, if they can change my thinking, then that's fine. I'll come back. But right now, I'm like, no, I don't think this is the truth. And so I went into those meetings with an open mind. The first meeting, they didn't really convince me at all. They said they'd do their own research and they'd come back, and we had a second meeting. And that meeting got pretty heated because that was probably like 2 weeks later. I had been doing more research, totally different subjects now. I was really switching it up on them. And we had our second meeting, and by the end of it, they took away my Kingdom Hall key, which I had a key for the Kingdom Hall. They took that away, and I bet they would have disfellowshipped me there. That's how angry they were. We were yelling. It got pretty heated. Both of those meetings were probably about 4 hours long, 4.5 hours long. But again, I had nothing better to do. This was on my break between semesters, and I didn't have a job. But then, come the next semester, the next semester starts. I have new classes and whatever, and I think Larry got in touch with the circuit overseer, or somebody did, and the circuit overseer, he handpicked a brother from the circuit to kind of handle my case. His name's Fred, and he's pretty smart. He's younger than the other guys. He's probably about 55 or something, somewhere around there. A lot more knowledgeable. He's done a lot more research on this kind of stuff, and he always gave great talks at the circuit assembly. But Fred was kind of in charge of my case, and he picked another brother. And we were going to have another meeting. And we did, and we talked about, and mind you, I had looked up by this time no apostate information. I was still working on the Bible. Why the Bible's wrong. I was looking up, some Bible stories, contradictions between the Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, and Paul, his accounts. There's tons of contradictions in there. And but historical contradictions between accounts in the Bible and what actually happened, right? 607 BC, that's bullshit. Or BCE. But yeah, so basically I went into that meeting, and I think that was a Tuesday night. And we basically had to cut it short because or end it because there was going to be the meeting. But that was a good 4.5 hours long. And I was basically hitting them with everything. Evolution, contradictions in the Bible, pyramids, Noah's Ark, Noah's flood, and all that. And I actually came out of that meeting confused because the brother gave me some videos to watch. They weren't Jehovah's Witnesses videos, believe it or not. They were actually movies that were made by other religious groups about these kind of subjects and why evolution was wrong. Yeah, on YouTube. But I came out of the meeting confused because I thought they had explained some of the stuff that I had problems with. I kind of figured that all that would clear up once I did more research because, I just went home and I looked up some of the things that they said, and it wasn't entirely accurate. I watched the videos the brother told me to watch, and, it wasn't really... the stuff they said on evolution has long been debunked. Yeah, so by then I'd had 3 meetings, all being about 4 hours long. And now, at this point, I felt comfortable. I said to myself, all right, I think I'm going to start looking up stuff on Jehovah's Witnesses. that's when shit hit the fan. That's when I got really pissed off, really ticked off at this religion. I wasn't mad at them. I actually told the brothers I still believed, if the Bible were correct, that this was the best religion to be in. I actually told them that, and I felt the sting of those words later on. But after those 3 meetings, I started looking up, child abuse among Jehovah's Witnesses, blood transfusions. One of the things that really got me is how much they flip-flopped on organ transplants, blood transfusions, blood fractions. The thing that really hit me was beards. Why can't I have a beard? But so I started looking all this stuff up, and me and Fred, we had a conversation over the phone about child abuse and how the organization handles child abuse. This is really what ticked me off. That, and probably how many people have died from not having blood transfusions. And I think our conversation on the phone was probably like an hour and a half about it. But I had excerpts from the Elders book, Shepherd the Flock of God book, and I knew they were accurate, the ones I had found up, the PDF, because my dad was at work, and I was able to get into his bag, and I found his Shepherd the Flock of God book, and I actually looked in there and checked it. So I knew they were accurate. I knew I could trust the version I had. And the policies, they're bullshit on how Jehovah's Witnesses treat child abusers, and that they actually get away. And I want to be a police officer now. So that really irks me, because all my life I had believed that Jehovah's Witnesses have better morals than the world, and they handle situations better than the world. But here this worldly judicial system that we're under in the United States handles child abuse better than the truth, than God's organization, So that really ticked me off. And by this point, or maybe a little later, I decided I wanted to be a police officer. Now, I'd always kind of wanted to be a police officer if I wasn't a Jehovah's Witness, either that or an Air Force fighter pilot. So we had our conversation on the phone, and then Fred talked to my parents, and together they kind of orchestrated this idea. And now, mind you, I'm in college. I have my own schoolwork, and my parents and Fred came up with the idea of giving me a paper assignment. They wanted me to write a paper on why Jehovah's Witnesses believe. They gave me a few topics to cover. Why they believe what they do on a set of certain topics, right? And they wanted me to reference articles from Watchtower Library and whatnot. And it was supposed to be however long. They wanted a reference page, they wanted the whole 9 yards. I was like, no, this is unofficial. I'm not doing it in any kind of style. I'm doing it in my own style. I've got my own work at school to do. But I did do the paper, and by this time I was actually talking to a girl in Brooklyn. I was, being a Jehovah's Witness, losing your entire social network. I had to revert to online dating. I didn't know anybody. But I was talking to this girl in Brooklyn, and very pretty. She is a Seventh-day Adventist. But I was kind of comparing with, could you do your own research? Her name was Dorcel. Could you do your own research, Dorcel, if you wanted to? They're allowed to go to college. They're encouraged to go to college. They do a lot more humanitarian work for any type of people, not just Jehovah's Witnesses. Yeah, I was kind of comparing things. And so what I had learned from Dorcel, I actually put in my paper. I compared the two religions. And I think it was like a 4-page paper or a 6-page paper. And 2/3 of it was, or a third of it was what Jehovah's Witnesses believe and why, and then the rest of it was why they're wrong, which was not what the assignment was, and that actually spurred my judicial committee meeting. And I actually told him in the judicial committee meeting that this is not to be used as evidence in my meeting, because I knew it was going to happen. It was bound to happen. I just told him this is not to be used as evidence. This is just, you assign this and I'm giving it to you how I want it. And he actually told me, he's like, why would you give this to me if it's not to be as evidence in your judicial committee meeting? Which kind of took me back a little. But he kept his word. He didn't use it whenever that came around. But that kind of sparked, my judicial meeting. Sometime in February, probably like mid-February, mid to end February. I can't remember the day. I remember when I told my parents, but I never took note of what day I decided to leave. We had the judicial meeting. And I knew there'd be 3 elders, right? I knew it'd probably be a long meeting. I put together an entire outline of all the things I was dedicated to covering in this meeting, because I just wanted it kind of for my own records, what was going on. And so I made an outline, and I pulled into the driveway, and there's 4 cars. So there were actually 4 elders at my judicial meeting, all 4 elders that were kind of in my case. And I went in, and the judicial meeting lasted like 4.5 hours, probably as long as the other ones. I think, or no, it wasn't 4.5. It was almost 4. Sorry. But we talked about everything pretty much. We had already covered evolution and all that. And that's kind of the things, those are kind of the things that Fred was the leader of the room. He really didn't want to talk about those. He wanted to talk about child abuse and why I felt that way. I was giving them scenarios like this. We talked about child abuse a lot and how they handled it. I knew, regardless of what they said, I knew what could happen with the current policies. They were trying to cover it up and say, it's all good. Not cover it up, but like soften it. It's all good. We handle it appropriately and everything. But I was giving them scenarios like, okay, what if a man abuses a child here in this area, and it comes out to the elders, and because they were saying how the elders will watch him, we'll keep an eye out for him, make sure he's not around any other kids, and but the police wouldn't be notified if that wasn't the law. And I just told them, if it comes out to the elders that a man around here abused a Jehovah's Witness child, they'd keep that under wraps. And if it wasn't the law around here, I think in PA it is the law. I'm not sure. I looked that up at the time. But if it wasn't the law and it wasn't brought to the police, there's no way you could watch him. What if he moved to West Virginia or anywhere else in the United States? He's out of your purview. He could abuse anybody in the community. He could do anything else outside of your watch. And they were silent. Like they had nothing to say to that. I was completely owning the room. But of course it was 4-1. They could interrupt me, and they could totally blast me with all this information, and I get to cover one thing they say. So it was kind of uneven in that way. But I had an outline of what I wanted to talk about, and we talked about it. And I brought all the evidence I had gathered. I had a giant folder. Man, I had tax records for the organization. I had proof that they had stocks in Boeing and Honeywell and these war machines, right? I had stuff like that. I didn't bring that up, I don't think, because that's kind of like information for me. No elder's gonna take that and be like, oh, you're right. But I had printouts of the Shepherd the Flock of God book that I brought with me. And Larry, he's sitting in there. He's like, how'd you get these? And I'm like, Larry, they're online. They're so easy to get. It's unreal. But yeah, that they just fellowshipped me. They actually asked me to leave the room. It was so long, my judicial meeting. We had a bathroom break. Now, yeah. Now, it was a room full of older people. So, bladders get strained by 65. So, obviously that would happen, but that's how long it was. We had a bathroom break, and but then we came back, we talked more, and they told me to leave, and it was like 5 minutes. It took them 5 minutes. Like, I thought it took them 5 minutes to make that decision. I didn't know what I was thinking. I actually came to the room. I was like, wow, 5 minutes. Nice. I thought it took him 5 minutes to execute. Yeah, I got disfellowship for apostasy. Now, what they got me on, they didn't have anything on me except a Facebook post. I posted to my friends, and I made it public. Basically, the title of the little blurb was "I'm sorry," and it was kind of like an open letter to any school friends I had, basically just telling them sorry for how big of a prick I was and how religious I was to them and whatever. And I didn't name Jehovah's Witnesses, and I didn't name the organization, but I just said, sometimes those kind of things rule your life, and I'm sorry that I was that way in school. But that's what they got me on. He kept his word. He didn't use the paper that I wrote against me because I made him not. But yeah, they got me on one Facebook post, and I got disfellowship for apostasy. They would have gotten me on something else had it not been a Facebook post. After I got back, after they told me, we're disfellowshipping you, and I left, I gathered up all my evidence, put it in a bag. I had to go to work that night because I was working third shift. So that's how my night went. And nobody at work knew. I made sure nobody at work knew I was previously a Jehovah's Witness for a while, because I just wanted to see how I could interact with them without them knowing that. And then I told them, and they were supportive, definitely. But yeah, I had work that night. But after that, let's see, I had a job, so I was getting good income. I still had college. I still had a life that I was trying to build after that. I was still living with my parents. My parents were still talking to me. My sister was still talking to me. But anybody outside of that house wouldn't talk to me. I found out a little while later, after my disfellowshipping had kind of spread out among the circuit, because I can only imagine it was kind of a shock, because it came out of nowhere. It wasn't like I stopped attending meetings. It was like, in fact, I was still attending meetings up until probably the second meeting I had with the elders. So I was still kind of keeping up the facade among the people that didn't know. I still had my duties. Like, at the time, I was in charge of like magazines. I wasn't in charge of literature. I wasn't in charge of literature. I was in charge of territories and stuff like that. That's another fun fact. Before I left, me and Trent, we redid the territories for the congregation. And I think even at the tail end, like even when I knew I wasn't going to be a Jehovah's Witness anymore, I was still working on redoing the territories for the congregation. Faithfully, doing them right. Just for them, right. And so I still kind of had that. I was still doing that even after the first meeting with the elders. They kind of took that away from me pretty quick. I couldn't comment at the meeting or anything, do any of that. They said you're not allowed to do that. But I paid attention more than ever before, at what they were saying, and I was looking up more scriptures than ever before. But yeah, they announced my disfellowshipping, and my mom was like, "Hey, do you want to come with us to see it?" And I was like, "Why would I do that? They're basically executing me publicly." And but I did tie into the meeting. And a fun little story. A few years before that, I had gotten trained on handling sound, right? And we had the whole tie-in system and everything, and you had to enter codes and dial a certain number to set it up and everything. And I was at home because I was, quote unquote sick, and I wanted to stay home. And my mom was with me because I was that young. And we were going to tie into the meeting, and I typed in a phone number, and then I entered the code for the sound system at the Kingdom Hall. And so we were not only tied into the meeting, but we were also broadcasting. So throughout the entire meeting, anybody else tied in with us while we were at home were hearing what we were doing, and we were baking cookies. So Yeah, so I knew the code for that and everything. And so I tied in for my disfellowshipping using the broadcasting code, and I muted myself. I didn't know what the tie-in code was for just regular listening. I couldn't remember, but I had that memorized. And and I got disfellowshipped. I was kind of irritated with Larry because Larry announced it, and there were like 3 announcements that night, and whatever was before it, and then Larry's like, and Caleb Channer is no longer one of Jehovah's Witnesses. On a brighter note, like that's how quick it was. It was like a side note. I got a little pissed off about that, and I'm listening in, and the song comes around, and I forget if it was before the song or after the song. I unmuted myself and I said, "Well, there you have it, folks," or something snotty, I wasn't gonna wreck it for everybody, or I wasn't gonna have it come back on me that I wrecked a meeting for anybody tied in. But I don't know. That's kind of like a fun thing for myself. I could have done something. Yeah, so I just went through life there after that, and I got back in touch with Austin. He's my roommate. Because we really weren't talking there after we graduated. We were best friends in high school, but we really didn't talk after we graduated. And so we hung out some more, and I think we even went to the movies for like the first time ever. Before I left, before I told my parents, my grandparents, and my best friend that I no longer want to be a Jehovah's Witness, I got back in touch with a girl named Sam. And her family is Jehovah's Witnesses. She's my age. She's exactly 6 months older than me. But she went to meetings, she kind of embraced it there for a while, but then she kind of faded out and I stopped talking to her, but I got back in touch with her again. And, so I was talking to her at the time, and I later texted her, like we met and I didn't tell her I didn't want to be a Jehovah's Witness anymore. And then I texted her later, hey, I've kind of made this decision, and she kind of freaked out. It was a cool moment. But, so I was kind of hanging out with her over the summer, and, sometime around August, Kaylee and I, we get back together. And, then Austin, I kind of like told Austin, I was like, hey, what do you think about us moving in together? And he was up in Wilkes-Barre, Scranton area, which is like northeast side of the state. And he was at college there. And he was like, well, that's not really an option because, I'm going to be going to college up there. But then like a week and a half later, he texted me back and he's like, hey, call me. And we talked about moving in together, and he picked a college out near Pittsburgh he's in aviation because the school he was at was so expensive, and so he picked that, and he was like, think about it, about moving out and us being roommates. I was like, oh wow, that's a big deal. But long story short, I mean, we decided to move out and we're living on our own. Some of the things I've learned since I left, people aren't evil. People aren't worldly. The world is not controlled by the devil. The world would be a very different place if it was. Satan is not the ruler of the system of things. I was working at Frito-Lay when I left, and they're so supportive there. I was telling them, I was probably so annoying. I was telling them all these different plans I had, and then a week later I'd tell them about different plans I'd made because, I felt differently at that time. Week to week my plans changed. And they were so supportive. And I'd tell them, everybody, by the time I left, everybody knew. I had to leave because, I moved. But by the time I left, everybody knew on my shift, and everybody was so supportive about it. And I basically just found out that people are loving. I can form lasting friendships with someone who's not a Jehovah's Witness. And people can have their own beliefs and their own feelings on things. And that's fine. I don't have to shove my own beliefs down their throat. I don't have to try and convince them. I mean, I'm open to a debate on any subject with anyone at any time, but that doesn't mean I should. But yeah, I just learned that I can be friends with people that are not Jehovah's Witnesses, and that the world is a much better place than I thought it was. People are doing good things. You know, the world is pretty fucked up, but it's not as bad as I thought it was. There's still hope. You know, I'm an atheist. I don't believe there's a God. If there is, that'd be great. I really hope there's an afterlife. That'd be awesome. But if there isn't, you know, I'm ready for that. There's a lot of things I enjoy about this life. Being free to talk to anybody I want to, without bringing up Watchtower Awake. That's nice. That I can pursue what I want to do. So I want to be a police officer, right? That's fun. I mean, I'm not saying being a police officer is always fun, but like that's fun pursuing something I really wanted to do. I wanted to go to trade school in a mechatronics degree because I wanted to do something that was kind of interesting when I was at Bethel. Yeah, I was kind of really rooting for a position as a mechanic at Wallkill for the printing department, or one of those traveling brothers that goes around and helps maintenance for Kingdom Halls, or being part of a permanent, it's not called the RBC anymore, whatever it is, I can't remember. I should know that because I'm under a year out, right? But I don't. But yeah, I enjoy the freedoms I have now, and I'm actually going to basic training for the Army here in January. I'm excited for that. I'm excited to get into the Army. I kind of always wanted to be in the military. I thought that would be kind of cool. In contrast to my grandfather, who, you know, didn't want to be a soldier. He wanted to be a construction worker. But different strokes, different folks, whatever. But I'm just excited for the life ahead and for the friendships I'll have. I enjoy living on my own, relatively. I mean, I have a roommate, but we're on our own. A whole new area, a whole new life. I mean, don't get me wrong. I'm incredibly lonely. I mean, when I'm home alone, like I've been home alone for the past, I don't know, my roommate went to work at 2 for the past couple of hours. You know, I had really nothing to do, and it's really lonely. And I expected to be lonely for quite a while because, you know, when your whole social network goes down, you're going to be lonely. So don't get me wrong. I do get depressed sometimes, but I know that's not going to be that way forever. You know, that's the other thing I learned. Life isn't fair, you know, and nor is it going to be in the future. I mean, I had to grow up quick, from who I was, relying on my parents. You know, when I was working for the construction group I was working with, I was only working 1 day a week. I was getting like $60 every week, or maybe $60 a paycheck. I can't even remember. So I was kind of relying on my parents a lot, and going from that to telling my parents I don't want to be a Jehovah's Witness anymore. My mom's like, okay, we need to sign your car over in your name a little while later, and you need to start thinking about after you graduate getting your own apartment. Like they started kind of, you know, get ready for us to push you out. And so you had to grow up quick. And when I say I was at work telling them about a new plan each week, I have a new plan every week. Nothing has been stable in my life for the past year. So I've had to come up with something new pretty much every week or every other week. So you learn to grow up quick, and you learn to, I mean, of course I'm not bragging or anything, but I am not the man I was in early November. Last November. I'm not the man I was. I'm not entirely mad of my childhood. I'm not entirely angry with this entire situation. You know, it sucks. You know, it's not right, but I wouldn't want to be anybody different. You know, I've been through, before I got out, you know, I could look at my grandfather, and he was in Vietnam. Okay. And he is such a character, right? I don't mean he's funny. He's kind of funny. He's kind of a jackass, but he is just his own person, and everybody respected him for that. And then my dad, he's kind of his own person. He's made his own, you know, made it into his own, but I wasn't necessarily. I was kind of living in their legacy. I was kind of living under them. So once I left, I had something, you know, I mean, it's kind of a crazy something, but you know, that made me who I am. So, I mean, that's a pro, if anything, of this whole situation. I'm me. I have mixed feelings about my family. I have mixed feelings. Well, that's pretty much it. I have no feelings when it comes to those in the congregation I was with. They're fine. They're finally in their own life. That's fine. I mean, I miss them. But I'm kind of angry at my family. I mean, of course, I'm in this, you know, early molten stage. You know, I just got out, but so I can be a little angry. But I mean, if I could say anything to them, I don't know what I'd say to my family. I now am in contact with my aunt. Her name's Lydia. And she basically went through everything I did, although involuntarily. She got disfellowship for something a long time ago, and we actually stopped talking to her. I remember that. I was a lot younger. I had no understanding of that, but we actually stopped talking to her. And my grandfather did too. My grandfather cut off his own daughter. So did my grandmother. So did my dad, who's her brother. We all just cut her off. My mom has never liked her, so I mean, she knows. My aunt knows that too. Like, that's the first thing we talked about was my mom when we got together. But I, having done that twice, my aunt got disfellowshipped and then she got reinstated, and my family talks to her every once in a great while, and I don't know if I'd say anything to them. I think it'd be really awkward if me and my parents started talking again, and I think I'd just cuss my grandfather out if I saw him again. Because for him to do that, to cut off my aunt, his own daughter, and then bring her back into his life. He told me she has a kid. He's 11, okay? And my grandfather told me, he said, the only reason we still talk to Lydia is because of her kid. We're hoping that maybe something will click with him and he'll become a Jehovah's Witness. That's the only reason they talk to her. And it's despicable. And at the time, I was like, yeah, that makes sense. That's how indoctrinated I was. You know, that makes sense, you know? I mean, I had always viewed my aunt as some type of rebel. You know, a rebel that I don't know, just a person that we only talked to when we had to. Right? And now I think back to that. I told my aunt this, that I told my aunt what my grandfather had said, because, you know, she should know now. And I just would cuss him out if I ever saw him again. For him to do that and bring her back and then drop me like a rock after I told him I didn't want to be a Jehovah's Witness. He didn't talk to me, not a single word. I don't know what his reasoning on that was. Maybe he thought maybe I'd come back and talk to him, you know? But just for him to do that just ticks me off. My grandmother, I have a lot more respect for my grandmother than him. she, first of all, she actually talked to me afterwards, but she came up to me. I was still going to meetings. She came up to me probably after the first meeting with the elders, and she just told me, like, choose the best way, choose the truth. And then she cried and she hugged me, and there were times during that whole experience that I felt unsure about myself, that maybe I had gotten it wrong. Maybe they do have the truth. I was second guessing myself. And there was a time even where I was like, all right, my mom, for like 2 months after I told them that I wanted to leave, my mom cried every other day probably. So there was a time where, like, my mom's out in another part of the house crying, and my dad's kind of off doing his own thing, and I'm just like, maybe I want to come back just to get her to stop crying, just to get him to stop feeling that way. The only thing that kept me in was that Kaylee and I had sex. And I knew that if I came back and if I had just given up all the research I was doing and just accepted that this was the truth, I would have to tell the elders that we had sex. And that would all come out. And I'm going to be honest with that, because, and people can say whatever they want, that, okay, well, there you go. You left because you would have been disfellowshipped for fornication or whatever. But that's the one thing that kept me from breaking down at that one moment, just to get my mom to stop crying. Now I'm living on my own. I have a job. I'm paying my own bills, paying my own rent. I'm looking for a career in law enforcement, a career in the Army. I'm on my own. I have a relationship with my aunt side of the family that I've never really had a relationship with. They're up in New York State. And I have a relationship with my uncle on my mom's side, somewhat. We haven't talked to each other in person in quite a while, but over Facebook. And so I'm pretty good. Like I said, I get lonely, but I'm certainly better than I was when I was a Jehovah's Witness. And I don't mean in regards to being happy or something. I mean, I was happy when I was a Jehovah's Witness. Ignorance is bliss. But I feel better about the person I am, and I know more about myself than I ever have at 19, because I've been through, what I've been through. Well, I want to be a state trooper or work at the FBI. That'd be kind of cool. Or some other federal, like the DEA or ATF, something like that. Unless I really like the military, I'm going for military police. And by the time I get active duty, because I'll be going for training, and then I'll come back in the reserves, and I'm going to finish up a bachelor's degree, and then I'm going to go active duty. I'll be an officer then. So I might just do that for the rest of my life if I like it. I don't know. But yeah, either state trooper or a big city like LA or something like that, or FBI, something federal. But I'm planning to make the most of it, make the most of my life, and do something I can be proud of. That's kind of why I'm joining the military. That's kind of why I want to be a police officer, something I can be proud of, something that my kids can look up to me and be proud of me, and maybe they can kind of do what I'm doing or do their own thing. They're free to do whatever, but do something I can be proud of and respect myself for, something that's involved with my community and helping other people. So the song I picked, A Little More by Machine Gun Kelly, there's a line in it that he says, it's my favorite line in all the rap I've listened to. He says, they told me fight night, I'm supposed to lose. So from my understanding, boxing matches sometimes were fixed. And so this is kind of a callback to that. And that's my favorite line in all of rap, because they told me that, without Jehovah's Witnesses, what am I? That's how I felt for a long time. And so, that line, they told me fight night, I'm supposed to lose. I'm not losing where I'm at. I'm in a better place.
So, in just a few weeks, on January 23rd, Caleb is leaving for basic training. He's chasing his goals, joining the Army, and without any support from his immediate family. So, go to shunpodcast.com, click on episodes, find Caleb's episode here, and you can leave him a comment under his episode of encouragement. Now for a special announcement. I recently recorded the story of David, which will be our episode for February. However, it's going to be a little different. It's also very involved. It's quite a heavy story, and it's very raw at times. There was a lot to cover, and the issues that were covered are very important, particularly that of sexual abuse, with everything that's going on within Jehovah's Witnesses today, with the 2-witness rule, with the Australian Royal Commission and everything. So this is going to be more than one episode released one week after another in February. It's also going to be released as a conversation between him and I. I see this as a very important episode. I encourage you to spread the word to other ex-Jehovah's Witnesses or people who are shunned, anyone that you think might be interested in learning how this aspect of things works within the organization. Additionally, I just think that people need to hear this episode, period. And so I encourage you to subscribe. That way you'll get the next episodes automatically. You won't have to, wait for maybe me to release an announcement on some site that you visit to see that it's out. Please go ahead and subscribe. That way you'll get them automatically. And, I'm not going to make you wait, one episode at the beginning of February like I usually do, and then one at the beginning of March or something like that. I'm going to go ahead and release this story one part at a time. I'm not sure how many it's going to break down into. As I edit it, I'll find out. But it will be multiple parts, and I'll go ahead and release part 1, 1 week in February, then part 2 the next week, so that it's not overwhelming, but also so that you don't have to wait to get the rest of the story. So I encourage you to do that. I hope that everyone is having a happy new year, that we're all trying to live life in this new world, those of us who are shunned, and I'll see you in the next episode.